Shri Namaha. Om Gam Ganapate Namaha. As usual, Mahabharata contains all the kinds of sastras. It may be all the sciences. Nothing is left in Mahabharata. Totally, we can say Mahabharata is one of the encyclopedia. No doubt regarding this, because everything is quoted, collected information from every part of the sciences. Even philosophical portions also stressed or emphasized much in Mahabharata. You take whatever the psychology, physiology, all these things are hidden thoroughly in detailed way in Mahabharata. So therefore, today I take the topic philosophical portions of Mahabharata. Let us start with prayer. Mrutyunjayaya Rudraya Nilakantaya Shambhave Amruteshaya Sharvaya Shri Mahadevate Namaha. The great epic Mahabharata represents the attempt of Vedic Brahmanism to adjust itself to the new circumstances reflected in the process of the Sanskritization of the various non-Vedic communities. Many diverse trends of religious and philosophical thought have thus been synthesized in this work. Moksha Dharma. In its philosophical views, the epic contains an early version of Samkhya, which is prior to the classical Sankhya of Ishvara Krishna, a 3rd century philosopher. The chapter on Moksha Dharma in book 12th of the Mahabharata is full of such photo Sankhya texts. Mention is made of 4 main philosophical schools. What are they? Sankhya Yoga, taught by Kapila. Panchatantra, taught by Vishnu Sharma. The Vedas and Pashupata, Lord of Creatures, taught by Shiva. Belonging to Pancharatra school, the epic basically attempts to accommodate certain pre-systematic Sankhya ideas, and yoga are sometimes put together and sometimes distinguished. Several different schemata of the 25 principles, 25 tattvas of the Sankhya are recorded. One common arrangement is that the 8 productive forms of Prakriti, they are the unmanifest intellect, egoism, and 5 elements: sound, smell, form or color, taste, and touch, and 16 modifications. They are 5 organs of perception, 5 organs of action, mind, and 5 gross elements: sky, earth, fire, water, and air, and Purusha. And unsankhya elements is the 26th principle Ishvara, or the Supreme Lord. One notable result is the identification of the 4 living forms, Vyuhas, of the Pancharatra school of 4 Sankhya principles. Vasudeva with spirit, Sankarshana with individual soul, Pradyumna with mind, and Aniruddha with ego sense. Next, non-Sankhyan text. Besides the Sankhya Yoga, which is in the foreground of the epic's philosophical portions, there are Vedanta texts emphasizing the unity of spirits and the theistic text emphasizing not only a personal deity but also the doctrine of the avatara or incarnation. The Vasudeva Krishna cult characterizes the theistic part of the epic. Next, early theories of kingship and state. How? In the Shanti Parvana of the Mahabharata, there is also a notable account of the origin of kingship and of Rajadharma or the dharma of the king as king. Bhishma, who is discovering, refers with approval to two different theories of the origin of knowingship, both of which speak of a prior period in which there were no kings. According to one account, this age was a time characterized by insecurity for the weak and unlimited power for the strong. The other regards it as an age of peace and tranquility. The latter account contains a theory of the fall of humankind from this trial state, ideal state, which led to a need for institutionalized power or kingship. The former account leads directly from the insecurity of the pre-kingship era to the installation of king by the divine ruler for the protection and the security of humankind. Kingship is this recognized as having a historical origin. The primary function of the king is that of protection, and dandaniti or the art of punishment is subordinated to Raja Dharma or Dharma of the king. Though it recognizes a quasi divinity of the king, the Mahabharata makes it Dharma, the more law, superior to the king. In Bhagavad Gita forms a part of the Mahabharata and deserves separate consideration by virtue of its great importance in the religious life and thought of the Hindus. Not itself a Shruti, it has, however, been accorded the status of an authoritative text and is regarded as one of the sources of the Vedanta philosophy. At a theoretical level, it brings together Sankhya, metaphysics, Upanishad, monism, and a devotional theism of the Krishna Vasudeva cult. In its practical teaching, it steers a middle course between the path of action of the Vedic ritualism and the path of renunciation of the Upanishad mysticism. And it accommodates all the three major paths in moksha: the paths of action, devotion, and knowledge. This synthetic character, the work acknowledgement in its great hold on the Hindu mind. The Hindu tradition treats it as one homogeneous work with the status of an Upanishad. Neither performance of the duties prescribed in the scriptures nor renunciation of all actions is conducive to the attainment of moksha. If the goal is freedom, then the best path to the goal is to perform one's duties with a spirit of non-attachment, without caring for the fruits of one's actions, and without the thought of pleasure or pain, profit or loss, or victory or failure, with a sense of equanimity and equality. The Kantian ethic of duty for duty's sake seems to be the nearest Western parallel to Krishna's teaching at this stage, but Krishna soon went beyond it by pointing out that performance of the action with complete non attachment requires knowledge of the true nature of the self, its distinctive of prakriti or matter, with its three components elements, and of the highest self, whose highest self or the Supreme Lord, however, would only require a devotional attitude of complete self surrender and performance of one's duties in the spirit of offering to Him. Thus, Karma Yoga is made to depend on Jnana Yoga, and the latter is shown to down alternative ways for different persons in accordance with their aptitudes. It would seem more logical, it would seem more physiological to suppose that he taught the essential unity and interdependence of these ways. How one should begin is left to one's aptitude and spiritual makeup. Now, doctrines and ideas of the Buddhist Tripitaka. In the Tripitaka, collected and compiled at the council at Pataliputra 300 years after the Buddha's Mahaparinishkramanam or Mahabhinishkramanam, attainment of final Nibbana upon death. Both the colonial and philosophical doctrines of early Buddhism were codified. Abhidhamma Pitaka, the last of the Pitakas, has seen parts. Dhamma Sangani, which gives an enumeration of Dhammas or elements of existence. Vibhanga, which gives further analysis of the Dhammas. Dhatu Katha, which is a detailed classification following many different principles of the elements. Puggala Pannatti, which gives a description of individual persons according to stages of their development. Kathavastu, which contains discussions and refutation of other Buddhist schools. Yamaka, which deals with pairs of questions, and Pattana, which gives an analysis of relations among the elements. The key notion in all this is that of the Dhammas, because Buddhist philosophers denied any performance or permanence, whether in outer nature or in inner life. Each of these elements, except for three elements that are not composed of parts, is momentary. The primary interest, nevertheless, is the human being, who is regarded as an aggregate of the various events. The individual person was analyzed into 5 aggregates: material form, rupa; feeling, dvedana; conception, samajna; disposition, samskara; and consciousness, vijnana. Of these, the last 4 constitute the mental. The first alone is the material facts. The material is further analyzed into 28 states, the Shankara into 50, and Vijnana into 89 kinds, of states of consciousness. Leads to list of 18 elements, 5 sense organs, 5 objects of those senses, mind, the specific object of mind, and 6 kinds of consciousness. A third classification is into 2 bases of which is a list of 6 cognitive faculties and their objects. The Buddhist analysis of matter was in terms of sensations and sense data, to which the sense organs were also added. The analysis of mind was also of corresponding modes of their objects. The history of the Sutra style. The history of the Sutra style. A unique feature of the development of Indian thought was the systematization of each school of thought in the form of sutras or extremely concise expressions, intended to reduce the doctrines of a science or a philosophy into a number of memorizable aphorisms, formulas, or rules. The word sutra, originally meaning thread, came to mean such concise expressions. A larger work containing a collection of such sutras also came to be called a sutra. The aid of commentaries becomes indispensable for the understanding of the sutras. And it is not surprising that philosophical composition took the form of commentaries and sub-commentaries. The earliest sutras, the Kalpa Sutras, however, are not philosophical but ritualistic. These Kalpa Sutras fell into 3 major parts. The Shrauta Sutras, dealing with Vedic sacrifices, the Grihya Sutras, dealing with moral injunctions and prohibitions. In the works of Panini, a Hindu grammarian, the sutra style reached a perfection never attained before and only imperfectly approximated by the later practitioners. The sutra literature began before the rise of Buddhism, though the philosophical sutras all seem to have been composed afterwards. The Buddhist sutra differs markedly in style and content from the Hindu sutra. Buddhist sutras are rather didactic texts, discourses, or sermons, possibly deriving their name from the sense in which they carry the thread of the tradition of the Buddha's teachings. The Purva Mimamsa Sutras and Shabara's commentary. The Purva Mimamsa or Karma Mimamsa is a system that investigates the nature of Vedic conjunctions. Through this is the primary crux of the system. This task also led to intended for reduce the doctrines of a science or of a philosophy into a number of new memorizable aphorisms, formulas, or rules. The word sutra, originally meaning thread, came to mean such concise expressions. A large work containing a collection of such sutras also came to be called a sutra. The aid of commentaries becomes indispensable for the understanding of the sutras. And it is not surprising that philosophical composition took the form of commentaries and also its values. Sutras all seem to have been composed afterward. The Buddhist Sutra differs markedly in style and content from Hindu Sutra. In this way, development of principles of scriptural interpretations and therefore to theories of meaning and critical interpretations, Jaimini, who composed sutras about the 4th century BC, was critical of earlier Mimamsa authors, particularly of one Bhaddad, to whom is attributed the view that the Vedic injunctions are meant to be obeyed without the expectation of benefits for honest. According to Jaimini, Vedic injunctions do not merely prescribe actionable but also recommend these actions as means to the attainment of desirable goals. For both Jaimini and Sabara, his chief commentator performer of the Vedic sacrifices is conducive to the attainment of heaven. Both emphasize that nothing is a duty unless it is instrumental to happiness in the long run. Jaimini's central concern is dharma, which is defined as the desired object whose desirability is testified only by the injunction statement of the scriptures. In order to substantiate the implied thesis that what ought to be done, dharma cannot be decided by either perception or reasoning, Jaiminiya proceeds to a discussion of the nature of the earth and nature of the ways of knowing. Because perceptual knowledge arises from contact of the sense organs with reality that is present, dharma that is not at all other, he also not shared. Reasoning based on such sense experience is for the same reason useless. Only conjunctive statements can state what ought to be done. Commands made by faith individual are not reliable because the validity of what they say depends upon the presumption that the person convinced are free from defects that render one's order dependable. Therefore, only injunctions contained in the scriptures, which according to the Mimamsa and Hindu tradition are not composed by Lakshmi. In this regard, they are not composed by any finite individual or the sources all valid knowledge of Dharma. Extraordinary commitment will be there. The Mimamsa rejects the belief that the scriptures are utterances of God. The word and themselves are authoritative, including in accordance with Jaimini developed the theory that the relation between words and their meanings is natural and not conventional, that the primary meaning of the word is universal, that in a sentence the principal element is the verb, and is that the principal force of the verb job, and which specifically belongs to the verb with an optative ending and which instigates a person to take a certain course of action in order to effect the desired world end. Though this theory provided the Mimamsa with a psychoanalytic and semantic technique for scriptures pretending the sentiments that are clearly in the injective form, there are two other kinds of sentences: prayers, glorification, those referring to a thing by a name, and prohibitions. Attempts are therefore made to show how each one of these types of sentences bear directly to show how each one of these types of sentences bears directly or indirectly on the central injective texts. Furthermore, a systematic classification of the various forms of injunctions is undertaken. Those that indicate the general nature of an action, those that show the connection of a subsidiary, the theory also follows strictly to the main course of action. Those thus suggest promptness in performance of the action, and those that indicate the right to enjoy the results to be produced by the course of action enjoyed. The commentary of Shabara elaborated on the experimental themselves of the Sun Sutras, and Shabara sought to establish the intrinsic validity of experiences and traced the possibility of lari or error to the work presence of defects in the ways of knowing. He also critically examined Buddhist subjective idealism and the theory is separately utter emptiness of things and proved the existence of soul as separate entity that enjoys the result of one's actions in this or next life. The Vedanta Sutras. Along with Badri and Jaimini, Badarayana is Jaimini was the other major interpretation. Just as the Mimamsa Sutra traditions of Buddha's tradition were revived by Prabhalakara, 97th, 8th century scholar, and Sabrimala's century was also defended by Shabara and Kumbhila, and Kumarila, a 7th, 8th century scholar. Badarayana Sutras laid the basis for the development of Vedanta philosophy. The relation of the Vedanta Sutras to the Mimamsa Sutras, however, is difficult to retain. Badarayana says any of Mimamsa view that the relation between words and their single factions is eternal. There are, however, clear statements, of course. Once, according to Jaimini, for example, the dispense of the fruits of one's actions is dharma, the law of righteousness itself. But for Badarayana, on the scripture supreme Lord, Aishvara preparation, and is contrasted with that of Badari. In such cases, Badarayana sometimes supported Badari's view and sometimes regards both as defensible. The overall difference that emerges is that whereas Jaimini lays stress on the ritualistic parts of the Vedas, Badarayana lays stress on the philosophical portions. The Upanishads The former recommends the path of Vedic injunctions, hence the ideal karma. The latter recommends for the path of knowledge. The central concept of Jainism investigation is dharma, what ought to be meaned. The central theme of Badarayana's investigations in Brahmin. What ought to be done? The central theme of Badarayana's investigation is Brahman, the absolutely Brahman. Remains a matter of country discovery between later commitment on a great South Indian philosopher of the 11th and 12th centuries, defending the things that they jointly constitute a single Pilchradaki work with Jain Kaligam. At first and Badarayana's coming after, it is logical order, and Shankara, an earlier great South Indian philosophers on the 8th 9th centuries, we can sell out the 9th century view that there are independent of each other and possibly also inconsistent in their central views. Variations and views. Badarayana Sutras refer to interpretation of more than Vedanta before him, who were concerned with such central issues as a relation. That's why we start from these types of individual liberates. Badarayana's own views on this issue are different assertion. The sutras are showcase various interpretations through the areas are to believe that Ramanujas is closer to their intentions from Shankaras. Shekanta Kalyanadam Shivangavasa Shivasama Mangalasar Sarvesha Guru Acharya